Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on Unified Observability with Autonomous Database. Thank you for joining us. My name is TxEventQ and I'm a Marketing Event Manager for the Developer Initiative here at Oracle. Today we're excited to show you a set of tools that you can use to monitor your autonomous database, including Grafana dashboards. If you do not currently have an Oracle Cloud account, we've got a special promotion with credits so that you can try out Autonomous Database and follow along with the demo. We'll also be recording the session, and the link to the recording will be sent to you via email in the next couple of days. If you have any questions during the webinar, we've set up a channel in our developer public Slack called Oracle Autonomous Database that you can access at the QR code here or at bit.ly/odevrel_Slack. Once you're in, you'll land in the general channel, and from there you can search for the webinar channel. We will also be checking the Zoom chat and the Zoom Q&A areas throughout the webinar, and we'll open up for a live Q&A after the demo. Today's webcast will be presented by Herman Viscuso, Director of Community Management. So without further ado, I will hand it over.
Welcome, everybody. I am very excited to be joining this session and to be leading this session because observability is one of my favorite topics. So let's go straight into it. So welcome, my name is Herman Viscuso. You probably saw me in one of my previous sessions with developer relations, the developer relation teams at Oracle. So I'm super happy to be contributing with the sessions. And today we have the privilege of being able to take a look at observability, which is a really hot topic among developers. And specifically, we will be covering a little bit of what observability is, what it means to be observing the database, and then going a little bit into more details of observing autonomous databases and taking a look at how you can do that finally in a Grafana dashboard, which is what you probably are more interested about. Okay, so you can always follow me in that Twitter. So feel free to follow me. I'm always tweeting all this kind of stuff, events, blogs, etc., etc. All right. So observability, what is observability? What is unified observability? What is database observability? So let's start from scratch, okay? So what is observability? What are the pillars of observability? Back in 2016, a bunch of Twitter engineers started, they were super proud about their technical, doing a technical overview of their infrastructure. They were very proud of how they were monitoring everything that was happening with the Twitter infrastructure, right? So they came up with a really nice blog post explaining that there are 4 pillars of observability. At the time, there was a 4th pillar that is not here called alerting and visualization, but it's nowadays seen as a derivative of these 3 main pillars of observability, which is basically metrics, tracing, and logging. Okay, so most of you should be already familiar with some of these. Logging is very high volumes, basically taking a log or a record of everything that is happening. Then you have metrics, which are the things that are measurable within the systems, and these metrics can have different units of time, different units of values, etc., etc. And then you have tracing, which is kind of also integrated into this, which means basically doing application performance monitoring and be able to trace, why a specific metric is behaving oddly, how that is translated into specific log, and how you can actually take a look at that on a specific request, for example, in your application. So tracing is basically the ability to look into the stack horizontally and to take a look at these different steps that took you to a specific, log event, specific metric failing, etc., etc., etc. So this is observability. Now, observability is difficult when you have multiple services aggregating this data, because you usually, when you're doing observability, you usually collect telemetry for the systems, but sometimes the systems are just doing that by themselves. So the database, for example, is collecting metrics, and you can access them via specific views, right? But what if every single service, like you're in the cloud, for example, and you have VMs, you have infrastructure, or even on-premise, right? Every single system is collecting their own metrics, and then you have to consolidate of this. What if you want to have like one dashboard that allows you to take a look at all of this? So it's basically crazy, right? Because the systems are working independently. So there's the benefit of having platforms that allow you to consolidate this observability, this telemetry that is being collected, and give you proper tools to actually, take a closer look and see whether you can improve the performance, et cetera, et cetera. One example would be OCI, the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. This also applies to other cloud services, not only to OCI, but suppose that you are dealing with VM and containers within OCI, you're dealing with infrastructure you deploy within OCI, you're dealing with databases that you deploy within OCI. You can actually rely on monitoring services like the OCI monitoring services that is aggregating all of the telemetry that these systems or these elements are generating, and allowing you to have a unified view of that information. And this is really good for services, because if, for example, from a Grafana dashboard, I can connect to the OCI monitoring service, then I'm done. I don't have to go and connect to every single service, So we will come back to this in a few slides. All right. We discussed observability, why it's hard, when things get easier, when you have like a more, let's say, an external observability or high-level observability with an external service. But what is database observability? A lot of people confuse database observability with database monitoring. And this is what might come to your mind like right away when you are thinking about database observability. Oh, yes, that's monitoring the database. That's only part of the database observability cycle, and which is basically doing the proper telemetry collection, doing the database monitoring, because you obviously need to be taking a look at the database and what's going on, doing a lot of query analysis to see maybe SQL, query analysis, optimization, et cetera, database tuning, because you need to act on what's going on. You did the telemetry collection, you're doing the monitoring, et cetera, but what can I do? What can I actually do to tune the system to make it look better than it was before? And then you start the cycle all over again. So database observability is a cycle. And in each one of these steps, on these 4 steps that you see around database observability, you need to have the proper tools and services to be able to do this correctly. Okay, so at Oracle, we're trying to make sure that you have these proper tools and services with the Oracle Observability and Management platform. But that doesn't mean that you cannot connect from third-party services, and that's also available for these Oracle services, as we will see when we deal with Grafana. Okay. So if you're interested, you can take about this topic specifically, you can take a look at a recent blog that I wrote. That's why I added a short URL in the top right, and also a QR, which basically takes you to the same place. This is a recent blog post covering all of this. So if you're interested, you can just take a note and go there and take a look at that blog. All right. Sorry if I'm going too fast, but I have a lot to cover, and I'm also very, very excited about this topic. So hopefully, if you have questions, just shoot them in the Q&A or in the chat, and also feel free to use the Slack channel that Tara mentioned, because I'm monitoring that Slack channel constantly, and we can take a look at this together. We can play a bit with specific Grafana configuration, et cetera, et cetera. So feel free to basically reach out to me also via Twitter. Okay. So let's talk about autonomous database. And let me ask, maybe raise your hand if you've heard about autonomous database before. Oracle Autonomous Database. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of hands. That makes me very, very happy, actually. Okay. For those of you that did not raise your hand, super quickly and super high level, what is autonomous database? Okay, so autonomous database is a cloud database service. So it's running in OCI, the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Behind the curtains, it is an Oracle converged database. So we are using the latest, Oracle database that you might have, but it's also cloud and a cloud native service. So it's running within OCI, and it's using cloud economics. So basically pay per use. So suppose you created an autonomous database and you are not running anything on it, and you are not using it, you're not paying for it, right? So that's basically the concept, typical cloud service. Now, this cloud native service behind the curtain is using the Exadata infrastructure, which is a super fast and super optimized infrastructure for Oracle databases. So you're basically getting the best infrastructure that you can get for an Oracle database, and that's only within OCI. Okay. Now, on top of this, which is an Oracle database, a cloud-native service running on top of Exadata infrastructure, we added machine learning for the database administration. So we wanted to give you a service that is doing a lot of things automatically for you, like auto scaling, auto indexing, a lot of autos there that you should take a look at my previous sessions if you're interested. But basically, a lot of things that you don't have to deal with, you don't have to do, because it's being done automatically thanks to machine learning for you. And we will see some of that when I cover the responsibilities of the service, basically what Oracle is doing with the service and what you are supposed to do with the service. We have a slide for that later. So that's basically autonomous database. It's the fusion of the best of database, the best of cloud, and machine learning technology for the database of the 21st century. All right, so I mentioned that we have a slide for the responsibility model. So if you create an autonomous database, what is it that Oracle is going to take care of? So Oracle is going to provision the autonomous databases for you. It's going to back up this database for you. It's going to do the recovering. It's going to do the patching and the upgrading of database. It's going to do the scaling for you. It's going to monitor the health of what is going on for you. It's going to deal with auditing, alerts and notification, etc. So what is it that you have to do? What you have to do is to make sure that you that the health of the application and the performance is good. So that's why we are talking about observability now, because we know that observability is up to you, and you probably want to observe the application and the database and what's going on. That's more than obvious, right? To basically see what is really happening, because nobody likes services that are black boxes where you don't know what's really happening. So we wanted to give you the right tools, the right services, the right APIs for you to be able to do that. All right. So if you go to the OCI console today and you create an autonomous database, I showed some of this before in my previous sessions. So it's just very easy to go ahead and create an autonomous database. You will see that you have metrics that allow you to diagnose and troubleshoot problems straight from the console. And you can go to the database instance, to the autonomous database instance, and start taking a look at graphics, that are basically showing this. You can create alarms of this key metrics based on threshold, for example, CPU utilization, etc., etc. You have events and notifications that are being fired at all levels of the infrastructure. Now, let me pause here, and I'm going to mention this next, but you have two deployment options with autonomous database. You have autonomous database shared and autonomous database dedicated. Now, the dedicated is dedicated infrastructure just for you, and with dedicated, you own the underlying Exadata infrastructure, the virtual machines, the container databases, so you own the whole stack. And when you own the whole stack, you can also observe the whole stack. You're getting events for things that are happening at all the levels of the stack, not only at the database level, okay? And then from the OCI console, you can also access Performance Hub, which is a tool for you to be able to graphically see what's going on and be able to see all these metrics, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, you have an opportunity here to connect any of these things to external services like PagerDuty, Slack, et cetera, you can actually do that. There are demos showing how to do that, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's take a little bit at the basic metrics that you can take a look from the OCI console. So you can take a look at CPU and storage utilization. You can take a look at SQL execution. So this is basically a view that you will see when you create the autonomous database. You go to service metrics, and you will be able to see this right away. And you can even create alarms right from here. And this would be from the OCI console. Okay, but I don't want to basically go deeper into what you can do from the OCI console, because I wanted to show you that if you go external, suppose that you are super familiar with Grafana and you really like doing the monitoring from your Grafana dashboard, which is not an OCI service, right? It's something that you run outside. You can also, connect the database and do that. So I'm going to just go quickly through this as, things that you can do from the OCI console, just for you to know that you can actually do that when you create your autonomous database, that right there from the OCI console, you can actually go and access all these really nice things that allow you to observe the autonomous database, okay? So service metrics, multiple dimensions that you can track. You can basically tap into all of these metrics. This is not a comprehensive metrics list. We have more right now, but here, if you see an asterisk, this is basically something that you can do from autonomous database dedicated, not from shared. For dedicated, you have deeper observability. Like, for example, you can take a look at the number of CPUs allocated. You can, for example, take a look at I/O throughput. Specifically, you could have really nice Grafana dashboard showing you the I/O throughput of the database. You can take a look at the transport lag, a lot of things, a lot of metrics that you can basically access. And as you can see, you have different units, for all of this, but this is completely accessible. And you might have heard about metrics, about events. So what is the difference between metrics, events, et cetera, et cetera. So these metrics translate into events that are being fired by the infrastructure and by the database. So when we say events, something's being fired, something is happening, and that might end up in a log. For example, could go into a log file, or might end up connecting to an external service and to Slack, for example, to send you a message, et cetera, et cetera. So the metrics, basically the value with a specific unit that is accessible, and the event is basically, okay, so this metric basically changed, and an event is fired, or maybe it went through a specific threshold, for example, to give you an idea, and an event got fired. Okay, so there are multiple events that are being fired. For example, when you create an autonomous database, you have an event there. When you terminate an autonomous database, you have an event there. There are maintenance begin and end events. You can, for example, use these events to trigger a data load to an autonomous database when you get an event that the file has been uploaded to object storage, just to give you an idea. So you are not limited to events that happen in the database itself, but basically when you have a platform like OCI, everything is generated events, and you have metrics all over the place. So you could very well be listening to an object storage event and saying, oh, there's a file, and basically trigger a data upload from the contents of that file into autonomous database. Okay, so there, as I mentioned before, there is an OCI monitoring service that is basically generating events and aggregating metrics for all of the services that are within OCI, and autonomous database is no exception here. All right, so just very quick understanding of the underlying infrastructure of an autonomous database. If you create an autonomous database dedicated, you're basically owning this whole stack that I'm showing here. So we start from the Exadata infrastructure on the top, which is basically the metal, the metal box, which you create in the cloud, and it's basically being provisioned just for you. You can run an autonomous VM on top of it, which is a virtual machine that allows you to run an autonomous database. Then on top of it, you can run an autonomous container database, because we are using the pluggable database architecture. You probably heard about it. Oracle allows you to have one container database, and you have multiple pluggable databases within that container, and that makes things easier. Suppose that I want to basically do maintenance for all the database, I just need to do that at the container level, and I don't have to do it for each database, right? So you have the container. Sorry about that. You have the container, and then you have specific autonomous databases within that container. When you create an autonomous database shared, you're basically getting one of the boxes that are at the bottom part of the graphic. You're getting ADB1, for example. And that's what you own. You're not owning the rest of the stack. When you deploy an autonomous database, dedicated database, right, you already created everything that is below it, right? And it's yours. All right. So as I showed you, we have multiple levels in the stack, from the Exadata infrastructure to the autonomous database, and we are firing events at all of these levels. Not only are the autonomous database events, like for example, when a backup begins, when a backup ends, when you have, for example, a termination of the database, when the database is being updated, but also at the infrastructure level. Like for example, they are the first bullet that I'm showing you. Suppose that you have an Exadata infrastructure that is going into maintenance. You are also getting events for that. Suppose that the whole box is being terminated, or you are updating it or something like that. You are getting events for that. This is important because sometimes we can make a distinction between internal database observability and external database observability. When I say internal, what I'm talking about is about the data that is being aggregated by the database itself. There are a lot of views and tables within the database that have performance metrics, right, for you, but that's within the database. And what happens if the database is down, right? The database is down, you're not going to be able to access those metrics. But what if there's an external service that is basically aggregating all this, events and all these metrics for you? Even if the database is down, you can basically go access that service, like the OCI monitoring service, for example, and take a look at what happened with the underlying infrastructure. You might have an event there that something went wrong, but you are not left in the dark without being able to access the system that is supposed to give you the metrics, right, and the data. All right, so let's move on. Here you can, just a quick recap, you can access events and metrics at all levels of the infrastructure if you're using autonomous database dedicated. Okay, so I just mentioned the OCI monitoring service. The OCI monitoring service is aggregating metrics and events for all the different systems. And this is basically allowing you to, giving you the possibility to access all of this via the OCI console, via the OCI SDK, the CLI, or via specific APIs that you can use, or via monitoring tools that are within OCI that are basically tapping into this information. So who's the number one listener for these events? For example, the building block of Oracle observability and management platforms is basically this monitoring service. It's basically aggregating everything that is happening within your tenancy and giving you access to it for you to do whatever you want with it. You can connect this to whatever you want, even to Grafana. Okay, and we'll take a look at that in a few slides. All right. So one of the really nice things that I mentioned about this monitoring service is that you can actually configure a specific topic, for example, for things that are going on. And if you are familiar with Kafka, for example, or with other, or MQTT, etc., you are familiar with a publisher and subscriber, models where you can configure a topic and you can be listening to specific topics. You could configure a topic here, listen to that topic, and maybe send that information to Slack, to email, to SMS, to PagerDuty, etc., etc. You can leverage the OCI monitoring service in order to do that. And we are getting closer to, working with this from externally, basically from a Grafana instance. So please bear with me. We're almost there. All right. So you can access from the OCI. You can access the performance hub. So the performance hub is a specific set of graphics and reports and functionalities that you can use to track what's going on with the database specifically. So this is generating a set of reports. It's giving you a lot of session history about what's happening with your session. It's doing real-time SQL monitoring. It's doing allowing you to see if your database is blocked and why it's blocked. In which specific operation, what is specific SQL query, etc., giving you diagnostic information, etc. So if you don't want to create a dashboard by yourself and go to Grafana and create your own dashboard, if you want to access like a predefined set of reports, dashboards, etc., you can always go to the Performance Hub for any autonomous database and you can access this service directly. And this service is free. You don't have to pay for this service. It basically comes with the database, okay? And it's pretty good in terms of how deep you can go with this type of information. So I'm going to basically go ahead with this. I told you can do real-time SQL monitoring. You can take a look at the I/O taken by the SQL queries, the time and the weights for the specific SQL query. You can take a look at the structure of the query, like basically the plan of the query, and see where you're spending the most time, etc., etc. So it's very fine-grained if you think about it. But this is very, let's say, very DBA specific, if you want. So you need to be able to understand when you're looking at something like this, you need to be able to have the capability to actually go and do something about it. Basically improve the queries, basically do the performance tuning. All right, so I mentioned that you can do blocking sessions with the performance hub. So this will display the current blocking and waiting sessions. You can have detailed information about each blocking session, and you can inspect and drill down into the SQL involved on this blocked sessions, why this is happening. You can actually kill operations from the service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so one final thing that I wanted to mention when it comes to the tools and services that you can access from OCI and specifically from the instance. When you create an autonomous database, there's one button that says database actions. Okay, so when you click on database actions, you get a whole family of different features and functionalities that you can use. And one of these functionalities for autonomous database dedicated is the monitoring pages. So the monitoring pages is a web-based interface that is using REST to allow you to administrate and monitor autonomous databases. This was previously known as SQL Developer Web. So you probably heard about this before. So we still have it, but now you will see it as monitoring pages within database action. Okay, just in case you're interested, there's tons of things that are being shown here, even access to the performance hub that I already mentioned, but slightly more information is being shown here. Like, for example, you can access a very nice instant viewer. You can take a look at the logins that are happening, successful logins to the database, failed logins, et cetera, alerts, basically the access to the alert log, sessions, what's happening to the storage, what's happening to the top SQL, which is a SQL statement that I execute based on CPU time consumed. So basically, let's say the top 10 queries that are consuming the most of my CPU, you can actually take a look at them there, see if you can do something about that, and a lot of different parameters, okay? So I'm basically done with what you can do from OCI, and now I want to go into Grafana. Suppose that you don't want to use the services, you don't want to do use the monitoring pages, you don't want to use performance hubs from OCI, you're already using Grafana, you say, hey, I really want to observe my autonomous database, and I want to use Grafana for that. There are multiple options, and we're going to cover like all of them today. The demo is kind of short because it's showing one of these options, but I want you to be aware of everything that's available out there for you, for you to monitor databases. And this is not limited to autonomous databases. There are options to monitor other database services that are that live within OCI, like for example ExaDB, but also on-premise systems. I'm going to talk about that too. Okay, so basically any Oracle database can be connected to Grafana, just to give you an idea, one way or the other. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at the Grafana data source plugins. If you have a Grafana account, a Grafana cloud account today, and if you click on Connect Data Source, as you know, Grafana, which is a visualization, and basically it's a full-blown observability platform. But they say the star of Grafana is basically the dashboards, right? And how you can create dashboards. For you to create these dashboards, you click on Add Data Source, and you're basically adding data sources. And the nice thing about Grafana is the multiple different families of data sources that you can, connect to. To be able to see information in these dashboards. If you click on Connect Data Source and you type Oracle, right away, you will see 4 things. Here I'm showing 3, but there's a new one that I wanted to mention. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the one that is not here. You will see Oracle Infrastructure when you type Oracle, okay? And that's basically a direct connection to an on-premise database. So the way it works is the system, Grafana, created an agent that you can run on an on-premise Oracle database. You install this agent on the Oracle instance, and you are basically sending data to a specific to one of your dashboards. Okay, so this is how it works. This is kind of new because it wasn't available when I created these slides, but now it's available. And this is obviously more interesting to on-premise Oracle database deployments, not necessarily with autonomous databases or cloud-native services, because when you're dealing with cloud-native services, it's usually more difficult to install agents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are dealing with on-premise Oracle databases and you're a big Grafana fan, you have this opportunity to, if you have access to the database, to install this Grafana agent that has been designed specifically to send information to Grafana dashboards. Now, if you don't want to do that, if you don't have access to the database, or if you're running a cloud service, etc., you can always use one of these 3 plugins. When you type Oracle, you always also see these other 3 options. And you will see this in the data source topic. So you will see that there's an Oracle database plugin, and this is an enterprise plugin. It's a Pro plugin. It requires you to have Grafana Cloud Pro and to pay for a specific enterprise plugin. If you just created the account and you are the Grafana Cloud account and you are in your 14 days of trial, you can try this out, but then you will have to pay for that, okay? So the Oracle database plugin is a commercial closed source plugin. You need to be able to have Grafana Pro and pay for the enterprise plugin. It's basically doing a TCP connection to the database from Grafana Cloud. It's basically accepting Kerberos connections and TS names. There are ways in which you can basically secure this. It's not super secure because you're using the TCP connection, and you need to basically open up your database to the internet for Grafana Cloud to connect. But there's a way to basically say, okay, I'm going to allow only the IPs that belongs to Grafana Cloud. Those IPs are listed, and you can basically limit the connections from Grafana Cloud specifically. Now, the thing is that this plugin runs unmodified SQL. So when you connect from Grafana to this to your database, you can pass SQL, and anything you get back, you can show in the dashboard. So you can access anything. You can access business data, but you can also access performance data, which is available in specific views within the database. So you might be able, using this way of connecting, you might be able to monitor business data or database performance data that is aggregated within the database, any of those. So usually what people do when they are using this type of connection, you need to pass the host, the port, the database user, and the password. They usually create a specific user that has limited access to the database, maybe only select access to the database. And then they allow this user to be just read-only, okay? And so that's even another way to make this more secure. You have 2 more plugins, and remember I was talking about the OCI monitoring service, right? It's basically aggregating everything that has happened within your tenancy. So there's a plugin called the OCI Metrics plugin that allows you to connect to this OCI monitoring service. So this is not only about extracting information from the autonomous database that you might be running, you can obviously access that, but from any OCI service that you might be running. So this is a really nice way for you to say, okay, I have more than one thing in OCI. I have an autonomous database, and I have a VM. Maybe I have an OKI cluster, like a Kubernetes cluster, and I'm running a specific VM instance, etc., etc. You can monitor all of these from this OCI Metrics plugin, okay? So this plugin is open source. You don't have to pay for it, okay? And so far, I think that the downside is that it's not available natively in Grafana Cloud. So you need to do some kind of magic for you to be able to connect, and I'm going to talk about that in a couple of slides. So the third one is OCI Logs plugin. As I mentioned that there is an OCI monitoring plugin that is basically aggregating all the metrics for your OCI tenancy and generating events, etc. There's also a sister service called OCI Logs plugin that is basically OCI Log service, which is basically aggregating all the logs for all the services that you're running in your tenancy. And there's also a plugin for you to access that. You can tap into logs, and as you can see, as you probably know, Grafana is very powerful in that sense, where you can even parse, the logs and try to access specific things and basically make that visualizable, to put it some way. Okay, so these are the 3 direct connections that you can do, for example, from Grafana into autonomous database or into OCI services. Now, this is a screen, and I will show this in the demo in a couple of minutes. Let's see how we're doing with time. Okay, so this is a screen that shows you what parameters you need to pass. And here I'm talking about the first plugin here, the first column, which is the Oracle Database plugin, which is commercial and basically requires you to have Grafana Cloud Pro. Okay. So you need to pass, as I mentioned before, the host, the port, the database name, the user, and the password. And this is also allowing you to use Kerberos authentication. The thing is that it's better that you create an allow list for the IPs that you want to from the Grafana Cloud service, and you can create that in an ACL, access control list. And you can also use Bastion and tunneling if you want to be more secure. And be aware that no MTLS or TLS is supported for this type of connections. It's basically a straight TCP connection. So once you connect, what is it that you can do to actually extract performance information? So these are some examples of what you could run to actually get information. So suppose that you want to get, I don't know, a session count, for example, current session count, or active sessions, or maybe inactive sessions, which is the third part here of the slide. So this is the SQL that you can run in order for you to actually see that. And when you connect to the database, if you click on Explore, you will see a box that allows you to pass the SQL, click on Run Query, and basically show you a graphic right away in the dashboard. It's very nice. Once you've seen that, you can click on, and I will see that in the demo, you can click on Add to Dashboard, and you have this new view in your dashboard. So the flexibility is great because you can run, whatever type of SQL you want in order for you to show this in Grafana dashboards. But be careful with security, okay? Now with the OCI Metrics and Logs plugin, which is the other types of plugins that I mentioned, you have a non-OCI based setup and an OCI based setup. What is an OCI based setup? Basically, if you're running Grafana within OCI, then it's very easy to take the box, maybe let's say the Kubernetes a pod that you're using to run Grafana, and you can actually configure, that specific resource that is within OCI with a specific IAM policy to allow for it to access the OCI monitoring service, which is the second column here. So if Grafana is within OCI, things become easier because you just need to tell, hey, allow Grafana to access the monitoring service, and that's it. Right? And you are running this plugin. Now, if you're not within OCI, then things become more tricky because you need to install the Oracle, the OCI CLI. You need to run it on a middle machine, right? And from that middle machine, connect basically Grafana and the OCI monitoring service. So you're using a machine in the middle, could be your laptop or could be another machine, to actually be a bridge between the OCI monitoring service and Grafana. And this is the first column, okay? I'm going to share this deck after we are done, in case you want to basically follow this and take a look and see if you need this type of information, okay? All right, so now that we are in Grafana, the nice thing is that you can use Grafana alerting. I mentioned that the OCI monitoring service allows you to connect to services like Slack, for example, but from OCI, you have to be in OCI, you have to be able to access the monitoring service there. But now that you brought all of this to Grafana, you can actually use Grafana alerting for you to connect to Slack, create your own thresholds, et cetera, et cetera. So this is nice because you are not tied to OCI, and basically you can go and use Grafana alerting if you want, okay? All right, so let's take a look at the quick demo now. All right, so this is the Grafana Cloud page, okay? And if you click on connect data here, and you type Oracle, you will see more things now because this demo is old, but basically Oracle, you see Oracle database, and you need to click on install plugin. So when you see Oracle database, if you are allowed, if you have Grafana Cloud Pro, etc., you will see this, and you will have an opportunity to actually install the plugin. And this is installed in your Grafana Cloud instance. When you create a Grafana Cloud, you're basically giving one instance with multiple services, and when you click on install plugin, you are installing the plugin in your instance. Okay. If you have multiple basically organizations, you need to decide where you need to install it. Here I'm installing it in one of them. And basically here I am upgrading to Cloud Pro. Okay, so here you as I told you before, and this is the same thing that I showed in the previous deck, but basically you need to pass the host, the port, the database name, and the user and the password for the user. And remember that you might want to limit that user. Okay, and one thing that you can do for you to be able to control the security is use these IPs that you can see here, which is the IPs for the service. Okay, so the service gives you the IPs for Grafana Cloud, and you can actually use ACLs in order for you to control that. And you can do that, for example, suppose you're using autonomous transaction processing, which is what you can see here. You can go to the network section there, where you have access control list there on the side, and you can say, hey, I want to create an access control list here, and I want to specify the IPs, that I want to whitelist, to put it some way. Okay, so you might, as I mentioned before, you might want to limit that user to be able to do only selects. Okay, so now let's take a look at just one sec. Let's take a look at actually connecting. So we are passing here the host name, and the port, and the database name, and the user and the password. Okay, for the database user. So once you do that, you will be able to click on save and test. Once you pass the necessary information, save and test, and you will get like a green light, that says, okay, we are connected. Once you have that, you can click on explore. And as I mentioned before, you can actually pass SQL. Here, we have a very simple SQL that's basically extracting employee data. But you pass that SQL, you click on run query. And as I told you before, as soon as you do that, you are getting the graph. Right? And when you get this really interesting graph, you can click on add to dashboard, and you are adding that to your dashboard. And by doing that and playing with these queries, you can actually build stuff like this. For example, you could create a specific dashboard that's basically showing 3, 4, 5 things that you want to show. Here, this is more about business data, as I mentioned before, but you can now always do that with views that are sharing performance data, like in the deck that I showed you before, the session count, etc., right? But these are the plugins that you can use. But there are other ways to actually do that. Instead of using Grafana Cloud, you could actually run Grafana and Prometheus, which is a time series database that is a great data source for Grafana, in your own Kubernetes infrastructure. Okay, so let me just give you this example. There is something called the Oracle Database Exporter for Prometheus. Okay, it was created by Seth Miller, and this is basically a system that connects to the database, maybe to an autonomous database. It basically creates entries, the metrics and the entries and the telemetry in the Prometheus format, and then you can connect Grafana to that Prometheus for you to be able to extract that information. So this is very interesting, because once you have all this telemetry in Prometheus format, then you can connect from Grafana. And in this case, this is a great use of it. This is basically monitoring transactional event queues. I'm not sure if you're familiar with transactional event queues, but this is a system to actually to do Kafka-like events between databases, and it's great to pass information, and it's great for microservices. And this system is basically using Docker to have a whole setup for observability over the database. Okay, we have three independent open source components here. We have the Prometheus Oracle DB exporter, we have Prometheus, and we have Grafana. And this is running in your own Docker. This might be running on OCI, for example. And you can start and stop this as a unit, right? We kind of use this architecture to create something that I wanted to share with you today, and I think that it's definitely worth for you taking a closer look at, which is called Prometheus Grafana for Oracle. Okay, so Prometheus Grafana for Oracle is using the architecture that I just showed you, and I'm going to show more detailed information about the architecture. But it's basically inspired on the Performance Hub AWR reports that I showed before. It's basically extracting that from the database itself via a set of exporters, and it's making that available as data sources to Grafana. What is the difference with what we just discussed, about the plugins? Now, the plugins are doing a direct connection to the database or to the OCI monitoring service, et cetera, et cetera. So this is different. This is basically connecting to a middle layer, which works as exporters that are basically aggregating and exporting specific information that we want to show within Grafana, okay? And this is contained within containers, pun not intended, right? Because basically this is working with containers, and the Grafana instance is not in Grafana Cloud. The Grafana instance is provisioned within your container architecture, and you own that instance, right? And you decide what you want to install there. Now, suppose that you want to install the OCI monitoring plugin or the OCI metrics plugin. Now things become easier because you are basically owning this Grafana instance, and this is running within your own VPN. This is not running in Grafana Cloud. You do not need to whitelist IPs, etc. So how does it work? And here I'm sharing with you a short link at the top right and a QR code in case you want to do like live lab around this. There are videos, live labs. There is a GitHub repository for this. So this is highly documented. I think that Paul Parkinson is behind this project. So kudos to Paul. This is really nicely crafted, and you can actually go and play with this in a super easy way. So it works like this. You have the database. The database is using creating a specific pod to create exporters, and this is exporting the three pillars of observability. When I mentioned observability, I said that the pillars are metrics, logs, and tracing, right? So this is creating exporters to actually monitor all of that. The metrics are sent to Prometheus, which will be used as a data source by Grafana. The tracing information is sent to Jaeger. Okay, so this is also used as a data source by Grafana, and the logs are sent to Grafana Loki, which is similar to Prometheus but for logs. Okay, so the nice thing about this is that this is a unified architecture, because if you start clicking, for example, on tracing information, you can move across these things. You can go to a specific metrics, or you could go to a specific log. So this is all correlated to a single pane of glass, and you can, of course, use this with autonomous databases, and it's very easy to deploy because this is fully automated. The basic project is using the basic project is using two autonomous databases to give you an idea with the specific microservices. So there's a demo that is showing how food ordering microservices are working. It's called GrabDish, and you have an order microservices, and you have a microservice, and you have an inventory microservice. So this is being used behind the curtains for you to take a look at how you can actually observe this. So it's kind of let's say a fake or a demo, kind of setup. But if you are clever, you can take this architecture, you can take a look at the Terraform scripts, and you can take a look at how this is deployed and basically reuse it for your own purposes, okay? If you are interested, and I'm sure, just raise your hand if you're interested in having a specific session about this in the future, where we just go over this like from bottom to top. Okay, awesome. I see there's some interest there. All right. thank you very much. I hope that now you have an understanding of how you can connect autonomous databases and Oracle databases to Grafana. Just a quick recap. Remember that you can do straight connection using the Grafana plugins. There are pros and cons of doing that. Maybe security could be a con because you need to have your services open up to the internet for you to be able to connect, okay? And you have this other ways of connecting where you deploy everything by yourself, your own Kubernetes kind of clusters, and you can run everything within your own architecture. Also remember that besides these two ways of working with Grafana, you also have all these really nice observability and monitoring tools within OCI for you to be able to do the observability if you are not working with Grafana, or if you don't want to work with Grafana, et cetera, okay? So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you in the next session where we can hopefully cover this unified observability platform by Paul. Thank you very much.